There is no more appropriate time for this conference. On this very day, Christians will be killed, exiled, find their property and houses of worship destroyed, and face humiliating discrimination in countries around the world. The fate of Christians in Iraq and Syria at the hands of the Islamic State has been in the headlines for many months now. The beheading of 21 Coptic Christians at the hands of ISIS on a Mediterranean beach this past February is an image that none of us will easily forget. The Chinese government has cracked down on religion over the past year and a half, destroying, damaging, or removing crosses from over 400 churches in Zhejiang province alone. In India, hundreds of Christians have been attacked by Hindu extremists whose violent efforts have been encouraged by the rise to power of a Hindu nationalist government. In Nigeria, thousands of Christians have been killed or exiled at the hands of Boko Haram, which is responsible for a larger death toll than the Islamic State. I could mention many more examples, and they are not mere anecdotes. The Pew Forum reports that 76% of the world's population lives in a country where religious freedom is seriously curtailed. Christians are estimated to make up some 80% of those whose religious freedom is denied around the world. Let us also realize, friends, that this persecution is taking place not in ancient Rome or in some other long-forgotten era, but rather in our own lifetimes. This very afternoon, we will be hearing from André Riccardi, who among his many accomplishments is a prominent historian who has documented the persecution and martyrdom of Christians in the past century, when more Christians have been killed for their faith than in all previous centuries combined. The community of Sant'Egidio, which Riccardi founded, has created a profound witness to today's martyrs at Rome's Church of San Bartolomeo, where we will be having an ecumenical prayer service tomorrow night at 8 p.m., to which everyone is invited. The title "Under Caesar's Sword" refers to the fact that the modern state, Caesar, is the source of much of the persecution Christians have suffered in recent times. To be sure, as we will be hearing over the next 2 days, the state is not always the perpetrator of persecution. Today it is often extremist groups, non-state extremist groups, who brutally deny religious freedom, though they are often encouraged or enabled by states. The regimes in which persecution takes place are strikingly diverse. Contrary to the headlines, Islamist groups are not the only sources of repression. In recent years, persecution has occurred under atheist communist regimes in China, Vietnam, and North Korea, a Hindu nationalist government in India, and a Buddhist government in Sri Lanka. In Russia, Christian minorities suffer discrimination at the hands of the Orthodox Church, which is closely allied with the government. The aim of our conference, however, is not to profile the persecution of Christians. Others have done this expertly. For instance, Paul Marshall, one of our presenting scholars, who first brought this issue to the world's attention some 20 years ago and has been documenting it courageously ever since. Persecution is only our premise. Our central aim, rather, is to confront the question, what do Christians do when they are persecuted? How do they respond? Relatedly, we ask, why do they adopt the responses that they do? And what effects do their responses have? Responses to persecution, like settings of persecution, are remarkably diverse. Only a generation ago, the Catholic Church in Poland, under the inspiration of Pope John Paul II, was pivotal in leading a massive popular nonviolent movement that eventually overthrew the communist regime there. On the other end of the spectrum, Christians respond to persecution by fleeing for their lives, as they have done recently in Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Nigeria, and Libya, among other places. We note this response not out of judgment, but rather out of solidarity and sympathy. These Christians are small minorities who have few other options. In other places where Christians are beleaguered minorities, as in Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Gaza Strip, their main response consists of coping strategies, as some of our scholars will describe. In still other settings, Christians are able to do more. They engage in political advocacy. They reach out to other Christian churches in cooperation. They build bridges to other religions. They practice forgiveness. They perform social services that establish their independence and autonomy. And sometimes they mount public protest. Rarely, but on some occasions, Christians take up arms in self-defense. Sometimes they commit injustices in using force. Sometimes Christians respond to persecution by continuing to practice their faith and even carry out evangelization under great duress, as one of our scholars, Fenggang Yang of Purdue University, documents in the case of China. Arguably, Christians manifest their faith most distinctively when they accept martyrdom. Pakistan's Shahbaz Bhatti, whose brother Paul Bhatti is here to tell his story, took the position of Pakistan's Minister of Minority Affairs in order to advocate for religious minorities in Pakistan, Christian minority schools of Islam, and others, even though he knew that he was risking his life. He did so out of his Christian faith, even foregoing marriage so as not to leave a family behind should he lose his life. He was shot dead in March 2011 by a group of Muslim extremists. Sometimes, anticipating martyrdom, Christians will even practice forgiveness of their would-be assailants, as did Christian de Chergé, leader of the community of Trappist monks in Algeria, who anticipated the death he would face at the hands of his enemies and wrote a stirring testament of love for them, as portrayed in the recent film of Gods and Men. Over the next 2 days, we will learn how Christians have responded to persecution and why and with what effects in some 30 countries around the world. Helping us understand these responses is our team of 14 world-class scholars of global religion. Over the past 8 months, Under Caesar's Sword commissioned them to fan out around the world to speak firsthand with Christian communities facing a variety of social and political pressures. At this conference, the scholars will be unveiling their results for the first time. Our decision to study how Christians respond to persecution was not motivated by arid considerations of methodology or even the desire to fill a scholarly niche. To be sure, we are committed to scholarly methods and balanced research. We report the full range of responses and shun facile judgment. More fundamentally, though, we are motivated by solidarity. By researching and making widely known how Christians respond to persecution, we can help persecuted Christian minorities understand better the range of responses that others like themselves have undertaken and, potentially, what path they might follow. We can help outsiders to assist and to stand with them. Conversely, we can facilitate the dynamic by which persecuted Christians teach something to the rest of us, something about the nature of suffering, in more than a few cases, something about how to remain resilient and to respond faithfully under duress, and something about the innate dignity and right to freedom of every human being. Christians are not the only people persecuted for their faith. The Second Vatican Council's Declaration on Religious Liberty, Dignitatis Humanae, whose 50th anniversary this conference celebrates, stresses that religious freedom is attendant upon human dignity and thus something to which all human beings have a claim. It is critical that we speak in defense of all people and forget no one whose religious freedom is denied. In the Middle East today, ISIS inflicts more suffering numerically upon Muslims than upon Christians, and reserves a more cruel fate for Yazidis, even than for Christians. Defending the religious freedom of all human beings is not only worthy for its own sake, but it also strengthens, not waters down, sympathy for the cause of Christians. We also do well to remember that the Christian church has done its own share of persecuting over the course of its history. Here again, Dignitatis Humanae shines relevant. In our panel on the Declaration, we will think together about how, why, and with what implications the Catholic Church definitively left behind all coercion in matters of religion. Still, we believe that a project and a conference focusing on the global response of Christians to persecution is well warranted. The numbers, the proportion, and the importance of solidarity within and among churches all serve to make the case. Not only this conference, but the entire project of which it is a part was made possible by a generous grant from the Templeton Religion Trust, awarded to the Center for Civil and Human Rights at Notre Dame and to the Religious Freedom Project at Georgetown University. We are pleased to have in our audience Chris Stewart, Senior Program Officer at the Trust, as well as his wife, Jean. Chris's help in developing and shepherding the grant has been indispensable. The grant funded the field research whose results our team of scholars will unveil over the next 2 days. Following this conference, we envision a public report that will convey the findings of the project to a wide audience, an edited volume that will present the results in their full scholarly rigor, a 20-minute documentary whose producer, Jason Cohen, is with us, and curricula for schools and churches to get the word out. We have already launched a website where the results will continue to be shared. Finally, I wish to convey a special greeting to the conference from the president of the University of Notre Dame, Father John Jenkins of the Holy Cross Order. Father Jenkins says, "I wish to thank you for your participation in this international conference on Christian response to persecution and for your keen interest in one of the world's most pressing issues. On numerous occasions when speaking of Christian unity, Pope Francis has remarked that today more than ever, we are united by an ecumenism of blood. Despite the many divisions between Christians and others of goodwill, it is my sincere hope that new cooperation can be forged which will protect marginalized peoples, some of whom are presently the victims of breathtakingly terrible violence. I am grateful to the Berkley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs at Georgetown University, the community of San Egidio, and to Notre Dame's Center for Civil and Human Rights for organizing this conference and for providing an important forum. The University of Notre Dame, especially through the Keough School of Global Affairs and the Tantur Ecumenical Institute, located in Jerusalem, remain committed to contributing to peace, reconciliation, integral human development, and a true culture of encounter. I hope the conversations of the coming days result in both learning and thoughtful action on behalf of those in need." Thank you to Father Jenkins. In a moment, I will hand over the floor to Timothy Shah of Georgetown's Religious Freedom Project. Before I do so, I want to share the news that the Religious Freedom Project's director, Thomas Farr, had arrived in Rome for the conference, but was called home suddenly due to a family emergency. So we keep him and his family in our prayers. Timothy Shah is a dear friend of mine and close colleague in the work of religious freedom. He is trained as a political philosopher, having received his PhD from Harvard University in 2002. He has a long list of publications, including co-author of God's Century, Resurgent Religions and Global Politics, published in 2001, and 2 forthcoming volumes on Christianity and freedom with Cambridge University Press, which he co-edited with Alan Hertzke, who is here at our conference as well, and will be with us speaking on a panel later. Tim has been Associate Director of the Religious Freedom Project at Georgetown University since the project began in 2011. Please join me in welcoming Timothy Shah.